Welcome. This is US Games Buzz. My name is Alison DeNicola, and I'm thrilled to be here today with Ciro Marchetti. His career began as a graphic designer. It spanned working in Europe, South America, and the USA. He covered corporate identity, branding, and packaging projects for a selection of leading multinational corporations. And in recent years, he has concentrated on more personal products. We'll be talking about those today, namely illustrations, which are licensed worldwide, but certainly the design of decks of varying systems, tarot, Lenormand, and Kipper card decks. It's a pleasure to have you, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for the invite. It's a pleasure to join you.
Yeah, so as I said, we wanted to get together today first to talk about your new card deck that is just coming. This is a production sample, so it's not quite here yet. Is that correct? Right? Or we're still patiently awaiting the arrival. And I want to start with this before I ask you a few other questions. I know that you have a lot of fans. You have very, very popular card decks. Ranging from the tarot to the Lenormand and the Kipper decks. But I was curious, and I think people will be curious, especially because this is new. What inspired you to create a Marseille style tarot deck, and what would you like people to know about the Tarot Decoratif?
Well, the Decoratif was certainly, the Marseilles was something that initially I had no interest in producing a version of. I mean, I owned a few decks and I admired their sort of decorative imagery, but it's not something I related to and hadn't really considered it. But I was attending a tarot conference several years ago, and one of the presenters, Russell Sturgis, was there, and he was giving a presentation on the Marseilles and the symbology of it. I was a vendor. I wasn't even attending as a attendee officially. I was just sort of like getting a free sort of attendance, if you will. But I was impressed by his theories, even though he indicated, and has since been supported, that his theories are not shared by everyone, So what's new? Everyone has an opinion about the history of tarot, But nevertheless, he made some compelling symbolic connections, which as a graphic designer caught my attention. And whether I couldn't academically support them and say, yes, he's right about that, because I didn't know. Mm-hmm. But there was something compelling and logical and rational about his comments. That symbolism was hidden. It was deliberately done so by the Cathars as a sort of like means of avoiding retribution from the Vatican, etc., etc., etc. And he gave little specific graphic examples to sort of support that. And that kind of convinced me. And I was really enjoying the presentation and seeing the Marseilles in a different way. And I know that it's very popular, arguably intensely popular with its supporters, who tend to reject everything that came after that. And so I was a bit nervous about getting involved with that, because I thought, they're going to rip me apart when I touch their beloved system, But nevertheless, I was intrigued by it. And I was aware that a lot of people like me possibly had sort of dismissed it because they weren't really into those old sort of woodcuts, etc. Mm-hmm. They didn't relate, let alone the infamous or the lesser illustrated pips, and off we go, So I thought, I would like to illustrate the Marseilles in my style, not to reproduce the woodcuts. 2,000 people have already done that. I wasn't interested in doing another sort of like recoloring or redrawing, retracing. No, but I wanted to capture the simplicity, the cleanness of those images, but in a more personal style. That was fine with the majors. But then came the elephant in the room, which is, what would I do with the pips? Mm-hmm. Just produce a pattern? That wouldn't be quite fair, because the patterns are more than just patterns for the Marseilles crowd. They read literally into every nuance of shape and form and direction and combination and inner space and you name it. It would be ingenious of me to say I was going to reproduce that. I don't think I could, and I didn't want to. So I approached it in a different way. I produced patterns, yes, which also would have provided readers with shapes and form and structure to get their intuitive juices into. But I also introduced little vignettes from the Rider-Waite as an invitation for Rider-Waite aficionados to feel comfortable in this genre that possibly they had rejected up to now, And so that was the rationale of how I approached the project. And I hope it's accepted in that way. I'm slightly fearful it might fall between the gaps, that the Rider-Waite crowd will sort of dismiss it as why, when I have the big pictures in other decks. And the Marseilles people might say, well, what the hell's he doing introducing Rider-Waite vignettes into our beloved non-scenic minors, I could sort of like really blow it. But that was the intent. And I asked my colleague from previous project, Lee Burston, to write what I can't. I mean, my grammar's pathetic, my spelling even more so. But it needed, how can I put it, the gravitas of someone who really did understand the Marseilles to read into what I was trying to do and explain it in that way. And I'm very happy with the job he did. So I'm waiting to see how the public respond.
I love it. I feel so, I was so excited to get my hands on it. And I do want to say that the book is really, the cards are beautiful. And what I loved immediately that I saw was this kind of modernization of the Marseille style that, for me, gave it more depth and more relatability. I always had a hard time reading the Marseille. I couldn't quite get a handle on it. I didn't quite get it. That's just me personally. So I love this, and I don't really think, maybe even modernization isn't the right word, but it's just a more contemporary, brought it up to date. The book is chock full of information, going backwards here, and he did a great job in adding that content. But what I do love also is in some cases there is a little comparison here with the traditional Marseille style to what you drew. So I think that it'll be an amazing place for people to learn about Marseille style reading.
Yeah, I'm hoping that people will appreciate the honesty of my approach, even if they don't agree with my conclusions. I mean, I think the general tone of what I was writing in my intro that Lee sort of embellished, if you will, was the things that I didn't understand about the Marseilles, the inconsistencies as I saw them, and I admit that they could be weaknesses or lack of experience on my part. But I've used that as an introduction. Like, this was the issues I had. I investigated further. This is what my take on it was, and this was my visual solution to that. And I'm hoping that people can, even if they don't agree with it, they can understand where I was coming from and blend that into either their traditional way of using the Marseilles, if indeed they do, or to just consider it as another perspective. And then, if they so wish, they can literally look past that and still enjoy and be able to read with the underlying structure of it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's a very impressive, it's a very impressive presentation, I have to say. It's a really beautiful, box set. And I know we're already getting a lot of inquiry, and people are really excited and waiting for it. So I can't wait for it to arrive, to land. But one of the things that I think people are interested in hearing, and maybe you can share, is how you got going down this path of not only creating tarot, but moving into these other divination systems. Like, how did that get going for you? How did you start doing that?
Well, it's a long while ago now. I think what I did was I always admired tarot from a sort of like a perspective of not really understanding it. I just admired them as these sort of strange images from the past. And as I've said before on other occasions, admittedly, I used my ignorance of the details, the understanding of the whys and the wherefores, I think, to my advantage at least. I would look at the images with fresh eyes now that I had to work on a project. I didn't just admire them or hang them on the wall or whatever I used to do. Okay, what does this mean? And whether it was tarot or Lenormand or Kipper, very often I would question, I wasn't sure what this card meant. I would read, okay, it's meant to mean this, this, and this. Well, first of all, whatever I read varied from book to book. So there wasn't this sort of universal, complete agreement. Mm-hmm. The community varied, opinions varied. So that was already a bit of a no-no. But then I would look at it and say, well, okay, I'll look at this image again, but that doesn't communicate to me what this book is telling me it does. And as a designer all my life for corporate clients, that has been my job. The clients would tell me, listen, our bank is this, our airline is that, our food is that. We want to tell XYZ message to our consumers of what we are. We're the best airline, we're the safest bank, we're the tastiest, or whatever the message was. Visually, I would tell that message. I would use color, I would use shape, I would use photography, I would use what style of illustration to communicate the client's message to their intended audience in the most compelling, credible way. I did the same. That was my approach for tarot. So if I saw two figures or a skeleton or a fool with a dog or whatever, I'm trying to be, I'm being a bit cynical here, but you get my point.
Yeah.
What did that card mean to me if I hadn't read the meaning? First of all, almost always nothing. But even more curious, even after I read it, I would say, well, I wouldn't have communicated that meaning in that way, And so it never, other than the very first deck, which I did, but ever since then, there's always been this ingredient of how do I personally think I can tell what is generally assumed to be the meaning in a more compelling way. Can I make it so that the Seven of Wands or the Six of Swords or whatever could communicate its probable meaning without even me writing the Six of Swords at the bottom, without even having the reader have to count how many swords are on the image? Would they still get it? That's the target. So when you print Six of Swords, it's a confirmation because the industry expects that. There's six swords in it because I know everyone is going to count six swords. But ultimately, do they really need it? Certainly after the first count, they don't. After that, it's an immediate response to the image every time it's dealt. That's the story that's going on, not 1, 2, oh, he's forgotten a sword, oh dear. No, come on, it's the woman in the boat or whatever. That's what counts. And then, can I do so in an emotional way? If it's a card that comes with a certain emotional tag to it, can I play that violin even more and make it sadder, more aggressive, more scary, more whatever? And in some cases, more neutral as well. It would be, in my opinion, as a non-reader, but someone who knows lots of readers and who's had lots of readings, is it a meaning that isn't written or illustrated in stone? Even the Three of Swords, which the Marseilles crowd love to pick as the poster child for what's wrong with the Rider-Waite, because it's too specific. You can't read past this sorrowful heart. Well, yes and no, because even sorrow comes with some context of time and rationale. And what is that context? That context will come from possibly the other cards in the spread. Mm-hmm. So that sorrow, which is being so intensely portrayed, can still be tempered by the cards that surround it, and can still mean beyond pure and simple, oh, I'm crying, in the context of an overall reading, I think. Otherwise, it's just rubber stamping images from 100 years ago, and that I spend too long on a deck for that to be enough motivation for me. It has to be about trying to tell the story in a way that is appealing to me in creating it, and it's a year's work, but also one that hopefully someone will like, oh, that's pretty or whatever, but also I never looked at it that way, or I'd never felt that way about it. Then, yes, then it's working. Yeah.
I love it. It's so insightful because, a lot of tarot people that are tarot artists are so concerned about trying to stay true to this format or form. And I do agree with you that there is there's so much more depth into those different, archetypes or different situational cards. So, and I have to say, the first deck that I ever used of yours was the Gilded Reverie Lenormand, and it really was like a game changer for me, because the other Lenormand cards I could never quite. I don't know. There's just no interest to me to try to figure out matching up the little image with the book. And those cards were so vibrant and full of life and full of visual context, so that when I was using them, I was like, oh, I get this. I understand. It did help me to learn the Lenormand.
I've always taken sort of artistic, creative liberties. As I say, that's part of the motivation. I don't want to just do whatever everyone else has done. And going off track, it comes at a price as well. Every deck I've produced, I realized like 5 minutes after I posted my first image on a Tarot forum back in whenever it was, 2014 or something. It took like about 5 minutes for someone to post that I didn't get it. So I realized that this is quicksand, and there will always be those people. And they're in some cases they were right. Maybe I didn't get it. In some cases they were wrong in that I deliberately didn't. Well, I got it, but I deliberately veered off of that.
Yeah.
And one has to take the hits off that. I mean, the Lenormand being a case in point. My infamous female rider. Oh boy, did that cause that was a soap opera. That was when I first posted that card, a semi-naked female postwoman Yeah, okay. I live in Florida. My postcode wears shorts. I'm being I'm being true. No, but seriously, once again, yes, one has to respect tradition. And ironically, I'm coming round to that. I'm before I would sort of like think, yeah, tradition's all very well, but come on, guys, I don't go to the supermarket and see a guy walking around in a night suit. I mean, one has to make it relevant. Yes, they are archetypes, but we live in today's world. Mm-hmm. Our moral values change from culture to culture. They certainly vary from the 14th century. We don't just live in this sort of parallel universe. Tarot has its historical base, yes, but its relevance must apply for today. Our families, our social structure, our cultural societies today isn't the same as it was in the 14th century. And we have to bridge, as designers, I think, we have to marry that. We have to respect the past, bring it up to date so it's more easily relevant, especially to the new audience that is obviously coming in to Tarot. But we can't go too, well, some people do. If we go too far, then we risk destroying the very bases, the very foundations which encapsulate Tarot as we understand it, the magic of the past. We can't destroy that completely. And so I'm treading this very fine line of deliberately going away from tradition, not just because for the hell of it. No, it's if I think I can tell the story a little bit better, blah, 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 I will. But I'm not going to lose track of where that story came from originally, It's a delicate balance. It really is. I don't know.
Yeah, well, your card decks are amazing, and people are consistently using them. I was at a dinner party. I was going to tell you the story, and I was at a ladies get together dinner party, and they started to pass some cards around. So now I don't know if they knew that I am, associated with cards or whatnot. But of course, it was the Tarot Grand Lux that came around at the dinner party. So I thought that was fantastic. And the cards were so, they were so spot on as of course that happens when you're in those situations. And I just had such a chuckle about it, and a thrill about that, just mainstream, Connecticut dinner party, and people are using the Tarot Grand Lux. So, I just loved it, and I thought that was fantastic. And I wonder, I know that you're probably aware of, whatever else is out there. Your favorite card decks, maybe of the ones that you've created, is there one that's special to you? And is there something else out there that maybe you that you've taken a look at that you admire or you like, or has piqued your interest these days?
Of all my decks, to start with, I always have a favorite, but it changes every time. Yeah. I guess the favorite of all actually is the Oracle of Visions, not the Tarot deck. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Creatively, that I had no rules to follow, so I could just do my thing, and I use the reference point of my own life in a sense. It's a kind of very fantastical, elaborate autobiography in a way. Every image was a scenario that I experienced and meant something to me, and I assume in some variation applied to everyone else. They just got to find it. They just got to relate to it. But that's why I deliberately didn't print titles on it, because if I had put, patience or sorrow or reminiscent or whatever, it would have already kind of pushed the image into one direction. And I thought I hoped they all had enough potential to be interpreted by different people in different ways on different readings. So it's ever changing, But they were, I mean, I wish I could point the camera, but I mean, I've got, for example, an angel that is wrapped up in sort of in her wings are tangled up, and I call it entrapment. And that is anybody, but it's certainly me. I mean, the number of times that I felt that way emotionally, trapped in a job, in a relationship, in a circumstance. And yet, with hindsight, there was a way out. I merely had to take that helmet off and see clearly around me for the solutions. And very often those solutions were there. It's just that I was emotionally trapped, not able to see them, And I thought, if people can see that in the card, they'll recognize that at some point in their life, Yeah. So every card was that. I have one of a woman that looks like Marie Antoinette, and she has like a little a metallic beak, and she's surrounded by birds. And so she wants to be accepted by the birds. She dresses like them. And they accept her. They're all sort of like walking together, And that, once again, was me. I mean, I was born in Italy. I was brought up in the UK. I went to South America. I came to the States. Throughout my life, I've always been from somewhere else. Never, ever have I been really of the community, I've always been an outsider, sometimes ridiculed at school or whatever, sometimes looked up to, looked down upon as the one that came from somewhere else, the foreigner, the immigrant, the refugee, one gets. And so that card was absolutely, I'm no Marie Antoinette, but her need to be accepted by those around her was absolutely something that was an integral part of my life. And once again, maybe, if you come from Middletown, America, and you've never left there, you might not know what I'm talking about, but I think you will, whether it's at high school and you're not part of the group, or, at work. There's always those circumstances where you try to be something that maybe you're not. You force it a little bit in order to be accepted, So there's all those little nuances. So that project was, for me, an absolute expression of so many personal things that I believe other people have, just different versions of it,
Yeah, universal truths, right? They run through the, all the cultures and all of our experiences. And and I have that right here, the Oracle of Visions.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I did want to ask you if you were going to give any advice to artists or designer or somebody who was going down this avenue, because there are a lot of people who are thinking about creating a card deck. A lot of people are feeling the creative pull. What advice would you give them embarking on a project?
I think the first advice I'd give them is to not do it, because I really don't know the competition. I think to get their expectations and their goals well defined. Yeah, I can't speak for everyone else, obviously, but I know that depending on your technique, whether it's photo montage or digital watercolor, whatever, the amount of time that a deck can take, it can vary. In my case, it really is an extensive project. I mean, a deck, when people say they've been working on a deck for X years, that's a unit of measurement that's meaningless. It really should be at least defined in days, if not hours. Because, I mean, if you've got a full-time job and you come home and this is your labor of love, Yeah, it could take years. But I mean, I'm full-time. It's not just a passion, I would say it's dangerously an addiction, much to my wife's displeasure. I mean, I'll work 12 hours a day and end up with a headache. I just can't stop, you know? But nevertheless, so you have to, is this a labor of love? Purely, you want to express yourself in a tarot deck, you think you can do one that's special to you, blah, blah, blah. Is there some sort of aspiration of financial reward afterwards, etc., etc.? In which case, you have to be realistic. If you post images on social media, you will no doubt get some wonderful, oh my God, I can't wait, you know? But that won't necessarily translate into real sales. You will have to risk your time and your money. And if you are successful in the sense of sales, be careful what you wish for in a sense, because just the admin, the shipping, the sales, the postage, blah, blah, that's going to be a real challenge, a nice challenge, certainly not complaining, but don't think it's just, one of those little side extras. That's an integral part that can be, you bit off more than you can chew. Now, obviously, from the perspective of a publisher, first of all, keep your expectations low as a designer, as a creator, because the publishers are in business. They will choose the decks that they feel offer the best opportunity, and that's not always going to be one of artistic merit, which is so hard to define. You know, the publishers, understand their audience, market trends, and so one has to accept the reality that you might not get your submission accepted. You know, and if you do, the publishers have every right. They will be the ones that are taking the risks, pulling the strings, and making decisions on packaging, quantities, the size, the card stock, the ultimate retail prices. So you have to let go of your baby somewhat, you know? And so it's a difficult one, but a lot of people are certainly considering it, and I wish them the best of luck, you know?
Yeah.
It's a dynamic market.
Yeah. So it's been great talking to you. My last question for you is there something about you, is there something about Ciro Marchetti that your fans and maybe even your friends don't know about you? Is there something that you'd be willing to share? Maybe some little tidbit, special superpower. Other than, we already know what your superpower is. We know your talent and your superpower, but maybe there's some other little.
I guess I have this sort of persona, since we're talking about social media and stuff. I have this persona on Facebook, etc. You know, it's like I rant about social circumstances. I tell jokes. I laugh about my mother-in-law, bless her, which is a joke. And I share my work in progress, you know. I'm very blessed that I get a lot of feedback, which I post deliberately, you know, to test how a new project is going, you know. Get a lot of good responses. And most of the times I don't say, oh, thank you, thank you. And that's a very British thing. It's kind of it almost embarrasses me if I respond to a compliment, you know? And someone pointed out that might come across as rude or indifferent or arrogant, you know, but it's not. It's just like, imagine you're at a party and someone gives you a compliment. I end up looking at the floor at my shoe because I don't know how to respond to that, you know? I'm more likely to respond to a criticism, which is interpreted as not, you know, you can't have the good and the bad, you know, and it's true. But I'm lacking in confidence. I really do not have the self-confidence of my work that everyone assumes that I do. I don't. And so I take it really to heart when someone criticizes it, because I do give it my all. And obviously, I've been in this business long enough, both pre and post tarot, to know how subjective it is. Art is subjective. Tarot is subjective. Combine those two, and all bets are off, you know? But with that said, if you spend a year working on a project and you give it your all, it can only take someone 30 seconds to write some really sort of like put down, you know? And so, yeah, I'm just not very confident. Everything is like a fingers crossed, oh, I hope they like it kind of thing, which I guess people might be surprised by that. I don't know. But it's the truth.
Well, I think they like it. I think they like it. Thank you, Ciro. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. A delight. And best of luck with your new deck that will be here soon. And it'll be our pleasure at US Games to get it out there into the world.